everyone, welcome to the Droid Garage. Once again, my name is Jason, and we are building an SE-2 droid with files provided by Droid Division, and the build is being sponsored by Acidity and their Flash PLA Plus filament. Real quick before we get started, I just wanted to mention that we have these fun little Droid Garage stickers that are now available, and they are free if you just want to message me your address, either here on YouTube or on the Facebook page. I'll send you one or two of them. So where we're at now, we have been sanding, filling, and smoothing all of the parts, and it's a lot of rinse and repeat. The legs, the different pieces I've put together, and if you look real close here, there we go. The green, basically I used a wood burner and burnt holes and melted the two pieces together, and then I used excess filament to kind of fill that in, melt it and fill it in, and it provided a really sturdy bond. I found out that if the glue wasn't good enough, one of the legs knocked over and actually split all the seams a little bit ago, so I had to patch all those back up again. So with all of that done, our next step is the base coat of paint, and for that we're using chrome. And while I paint the entire piece, I pay special attentions to the edges, corners, areas that might get wear, because what we are going to do later is mask off parts of this chrome before we apply the regular color paint, and that's going to apply the damage or weathering effects. So I want to get as smooth as possible of a coat on those areas. So that's where we're at right now. Stay tuned. I will be right back after I get some of these painted, and we'll be back with the rest of the process. Thanks. Hello, we are back inside for this next stage. We have everything sanded down. It has been filled with the acetone and Bondo mix, and then we've sanded that down, hit it with some filler primer, sanded that down, did a wet sand, and then the next step after that is to coat everything with chrome. So I did chrome spray paint, and as an example, I brought in one of the hands, and I don't know how much detail you can catch on that, but it's not the greatest. Like, I can see a couple lines there. So anytime you hit it with any type of shiny paint or primer, it's going to bring out the flaws. So at this point, we could either pause, go back and repeat the other steps, sand it back down, fill it, and get it as pristine as we want to, or we could call it well enough and move on, and knowing that we're going to apply weathering and some damage to it anyway, which is what I choose to do at this time. So again, a really quick coat of chrome is on there. It's not super solid. Reason being is it's going to obviously get the top coat of paint on it. But before we do that, actually, I use this liquid latex or drawing gum, and I'll leave a link to that in the notes. And I'll use the back part of a paintbrush and dip it inside, and it's got like a liquidy consistency, but it'll hold pretty well. And then we're going to look at areas that you think are going to take some damage, and we're going to apply thusly. And let's see if you can see that. Yeah, you can kind of see. So I'm going to stop the video, go through and apply the liquid masking latex on this part, and then we will come back after it's time to paint. All right. We are back, and the hand is painted. Once again, we used this liquid latex. I've heard of folks using toothpaste and also mustard, I think I remember reading once. I have not tried either of those. When I did my research, I learned about the liquid latex and went straight for that. And the reason I like it, and hopefully this will come out well, is when it peels off, you can hopefully see that it's kind of stretching. And when it does that, it really flakes the paint and gives it some nice texture and realistic weathering. Now, I do this with gloves because hands will get dirty, and especially with this being white paint, it's not tacky, but it is fresh enough that it'll leave fingerprints on it if your fingerprints get dirty. Another thing I use is a toothpick. Sometimes it gets difficult to get these little pieces off, especially when they're not on there very thick. So I'll use a toothpick. And then another thing I'll do, and let's see if I can get this in there well. Okay, so if we look at this chip, sometimes the paint doesn't come off all the way, and I'll use the toothpick to kind of scrape it back and make sure it comes all the way off. There's a little more gum there. Another thing I would like to mention, and so we have some more, here's some flaws, obviously. We have some layer lines I didn't quite get, and I am going to choose to ignore those because it's a hand, it's a droid, it's not going to be reflective or smooth or shiny. We could weather it up, apply some dirt. I don't think it's going to be that noticeable, especially if you're just walking past it and seeing it. Another flaw I will point out is the paint didn't quite coat fully. You can kind of see some of the silver below. And again, I'm going to ignore those also. And part of the reason for that is I think I'm going to paint these armored pieces a different color anyway, so it's not going to make a difference. Yeah, so I'm going to let those go. But if something like that comes out on yours and it bothers you, then of course, sand it. Take it back down again, use some filler, get it to where you want it to be. However, especially at this stage, it's hard to not just want to rush through things. You get so eager towards the end. At least I do. Another reason why I use a toothpick versus anything else is because it doesn't scratch quite as hard. It's not as, wood is softer than metal, right? So if it won't scratch or peel off the chrome that we have underneath of there. Another thing that you could do if you so wish to is you could also apply a top coat over the chrome and then apply the liquid latex and then the color of paint that you want. I've done that on a few commissioned pieces, but those I was paid money for and wanted to make sure that they came out absolutely perfect. Something like this, though, I'm not all that worried about. I have had in the past where the liquid latex will pull up a little bit of the chrome. Not necessarily pull it up, but it kind of dulls it a little bit. We got it. If you'll notice on edges, places you think are gonna get nicked if it were real. And then again, if you notice parts where the paint didn't come up all the way or didn't quite chip the way you wanted it to, you can use your toothpick and kind of help it along. Next thing we're gonna do is mix up some dirt. A dirt color, I guess I should say. I'll use acrylic paint for that, and I'll cover that in the next video. And not only will we add weather, but we'll put some down inside of those little cracks too, and it'll make these little chips stand out more. So there we have it. First coat of paint. Hang on for some more tips. Hey, we are going to wrap up this video by finishing up the hand. And if you remember, we used liquid latex, put it over top of the areas that we wanted to have the weather damage, spray painted it with our base coat, the off-white. Actually, I'm using heritage white for this to be specific. And then we scratched off peeled off the latex. Now, the next step to that is if we're going to do multiple colors is to mask off what you don't want colored with the second coat. And then we'll apply more liquid latex and then apply that second color, repeating the process again. And I have done that already, and here is the result. And if you can tell, there we go. So you can see the silver and the heritage white. And then again, I put liquid latex over that, hit it with the blue, peeled it off, and I think that gives a really cool effect. And then there are going to be some areas where, and I don't know, I mean on the wrist there, where I do just the blue, you know, the primary color is still intact, to give the impression of not as much damage. And then another thing I did is I had to use thinned down enamel paint to get black inside of the knuckles because I wanted a different color in there. And at a distance, it kind of blends in, which I'm not a fan of. So I think I'm going to paint back over that with a lighter gray next. The acrylic paints were not sticking to this gloss paint very well. So that's why I used the base coat of the enamel, and now I'll paint over it with the acrylics. My father-in-law is a wise man, and he is a furniture builder, a wood crafter, and told me long ago to not point out the flaws of your projects to the people you show them to, because that's usually the first thing you want to do. It's the first thing I want to do. And most of the times, if you're a maker or an artist and you show something to a friend or a loved one that you're close with, you're intimate with that project you're working with, so you know where all the flaws are, and you just feel the need to right away point those out. But since we are close and we are working on this project together, I feel the need to point out some mistakes because we're going to correct these together, right? So there's some blue there that I messed up on. And again, we have, let's see if I can get this zoomed in right. You can kind of see right there, there's like a layer line crack still. There's some more fudged paint. In here, you can see where it didn't mask very well, and it's a little globby. So we have a fair amount of errors on here that we're going to correct in the next step when we bust out the acrylic paints and do the additional weathering. I will point out that one benefit of using the layering of the paints on top of each other and having that toothpick handy is a lot of times you could scrape some of that paint off with the toothpick. Another tip is I keep a bottle of rubbing alcohol nearby and cotton swabs or Q-tips. You can soak a little bit on in there. It'll thin it out enough to where you can wipe it up, add some water. Sometimes you still get a little bit of streaking, but again, we'll cover that up with the weathering. It just doesn't make it as bad as these big blobules. And again, you know what? We'll cover that in the next video. We'll actually do some of those. So that's where we're at. We have the hand finished and actually been working on the arm. So if we want to talk errors, let's look there so that you can see there's some more blue paint fub-ups. And I would recommend wearing rubber gloves when doing the paint. It'll kind of prevent some of that. So thanks for hanging out, and I appreciate everybody that's been following along up to this point. Stay tuned. In another few weeks, the next video will include our acrylic paint and weathering from that, since we've already done the chipping, and we're going to tie everything together and wrap this project up. Stay tuned. Hello, makers and droid builders. When I left you last time, we were working on the droid hands of the SE-2 droid with files provided by Droid Division. And again, this whole build is being sponsored by Acidity and their Flash PLA Plus filament, which smooths out fantastic, excellent filament to use for finishing projects such as this. And I'm not BSing it, seriously. Anyways, here we are. We have the hands, and there's some paint flobs we wanted to fix, and we're going to get started on some weathering. Things that I keep at the desk handy right now. I have my tub of paintbrushes, good ones that I use. I have a janky paintbrush that I use to get into crevices to remove excess paint with, or dirt. I have a spray bottle of water. I have my rubbing alcohol, I have some Q-tips, I have my toothpicks, I have a little knife, and some new stuff I'm going to try. I don't know if I'll get to it in this video, is this rust stuff by Green Stuff World. Rust Textures, actually. Medium oxide rust. So I'm curious to see how this works out. Oh yeah, and paints. I always keep standard colors, black, white, gray, brown, and my favorite for weathering is burnt umber. And I'm just using regular old inexpensive acrylic paints that you can get at your craft store. I've picked up some of these at the Target. Walmart will have them. Don't spend a lot of money. We're just going to wet it down and brush it off. That's it. So hang on for a second. I'm going to flip the camera around and we're going to look at a few tips and see if we can wrap up this project today. Stay tuned. All right, gang, thanks for hanging in there. I know I went over a list of things that I have. What I may have left out is paper towels, an old rag, a workshop rag, some Windex, and I have Applied burnt umber, brown, and then some Windex in this center one. I actually watered down the burnt, or not, yeah, with the burnt umber and the brown with the Windex. I had a friend tell me once that using windshield wiper fluid and Windex is better to water down your paints with than water or paint thinner. And I agree with that. I can't tell you why. Watering it down with water, it just doesn't mix quite the same. And paint thinner sometimes dilutes it too much and does too much damage to the paint. But again, I put a spray or two of Windex in there. Give that a shot and let me know what you think. At any rate, first thing I wanted to try out is I want to get rid of these little blobs inside here. And let's see if we can get some better light. Yeah, you can see it. And considering this is a hand, probably don't need to go through this extent, but I'm kind of curious to see how well we can get this to work. I'm so sorry for the lighting, guys. Let's see. So let's put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on the Q-tip. And you can see it's actually coming off, and it's only taking off the blue. It's not really doing anything to the heritage white. But something else that's neat, let's see if I can make this work. If you want to take that rubbing alcohol, let's do it right here. And we'll rub it over this heritage white. We can kind of start seeing that chrome slightly come through, but it gives a nice little buff effect. And while we could remove all of this blue with this method, it's going to be time consuming. And considering I'm going to be dumping brown on it, so again, can you even see? Probably not. I'm trying, folks, sorry. Yeah, you can kind of see right in there where the paint is lifting up. Again, if you have your toothpick handy, you can kind of scrape some of that off. It's a little mushy in spots, so it rubs off a little bit easier. And then you can always finish it off with a little spritz of water on a paper towel or Q-tip. Again, it depends on how detailed you want to get with it. If this is a hand, it's going to get messed up, so I'm not all that particular with it. And this is where things kind of get nerve-wracking. Making a mess often makes me nervous sometimes. There you go. Damage is done. And then we'll just wipe. There you go. Now, there is no clear coat on top of this, so this acrylic is going to grind into the spray paint that I used and kind of stain it. And like if you feel like that's too heavy, you get nervous, you can back things out to some degree, spray it with some water. There you go. You can still see that it's slightly discolored, so it does have that tinge of some weathering to it, but it doesn't have the big spots of color in the blobs if you are concerned that you really messed up or didn't want that color there. The idea is layers, many layers. Add in and then wipe off. Of course, get into little crevices. The other areas I hit are where the paint is chipped. So, that's the wrong one. So let's take a look at, here we'll use this one for example. So I'll get in here with the brush and really get underneath of where the paint is lifted up at. Let it sit for a minute or two so that it dries. Wipe, and that one really didn't come out that well, so I'll do it again. Actually, I'll let it sit for a second, and then like this one. This one's been sitting. I did the wipe, but there's that streak of brown that I just think looks a little too fake. So I'll wet down and remove it. Same over here. There's one of those little nicks from a printing flaw that was overlooked. Now it's got some brown in it. It just looks like a natural ding. I feel like there's too much dirt inside of the crevice there, so I'll wipe some of that out. Oops, I did too much. There's some blue in there that I can see, so still I'll wipe it in, let it sit for a minute or two. Maybe hit this area over here. Oh, look, here's a crevice. Now that the initial dip of paint is kind of dried off and been applied, it's more of like a dry brushing technique. I still kind of like to get that and really grind it into the edges. No, into the edges, I'm sorry, into the crevices. I think it looks good. Might be a little too much. And that's the other thing I like about doing the acrylics over top of the spray paint. They kind of chip off of each other, so you can actually scratch and remove stuff that way if you want to. Or again, a little spritz of water. So you can fine tune this as much as you want to. And that's where we're at. Again, inside here, I'll go heavy where that blue is, and if it wipes off and the blue shines through and still looks bad, then maybe I will just go ahead and take more off. But something else to think about too, and I'll point this out to you later on in this video, is I have done a dry fit of the Droid, and we're looking at this little piece, and this is our frame of reference is right here. This 8-10 inches of product, right? So we're going to see the things that we don't want to see. But once we put this and attach it to the Droid, we're going to have 6 feet of an item, of a piece of work to look at. You're not going to pay attention to that little nick there that we can see because it's sitting here on our desk. So as easy as it is to become really wrapped up in the details here, don't let it ruin your good time. Find your zen. So that's it, gang. And here's an example of when the dry brush comes in handy. I'll dip it in there, try to pull out what I can. And now that it's wet, I'll kind of share the wealth. Again, wipe down the excess, and that looks pretty damn cool. So I'm going to turn off the video, and I'm going to finish applying this burnt umber to the hand and the arm. And again, here's a couple of those paint mistakes. Just be careful you don't use too much. Again, it will eat away at the your base paint also. But there you go. There's a trick for you. All right, thanks guys. I will be back momentarily.